16 bytes. That is the size of the thing Microsoft puts inside a picture you made on your own computer. Not in a file header you could strip out, in the pixels, in the color values themselves scattered through the image, every bit of it written at least 3 times over, because once was not considered enough. 16 bytes is a globally unique identifier, a serial number. And your computer did not choose it. It arrived from a server. It came back in a reply to a message your machine had sent moments earlier, a message carrying the words you had just typed. So what is a serial number from Microsoft's cloud doing inside a picture that Microsoft's own documentation says was generated on your device? Hold that question because the documentation is where this gets strange. There are 2 support pages for the Windows features that do this, one for Image Creator in Paint, one for the Copilot Plus PC features. I read both of them in full on the 26th of August, 2026. Then I counted words. The word, Watermark, appears 0 times on either page, not once. GUID 0, unique identifier 0. Now this is not a story about a company breaking a law. As far as I can tell, Microsoft is complying with a European transparency rule that began to apply at the start of this month, and doing rather more than the rule asks. It is a story about what rather more turned out to mean. Because a second company answered that same law in the same month, and what they shipped could not be more different. Chapter 1, 16 bytes. On the 20th of August, 2026, a reverse engineer published 2,944 words about Microsoft Paint. His name is Xusheng Li. He is not anonymous, and that matters on this beat, so let me tell you who he is from his own curriculum vitae rather than from anybody's summary of it. He is a software developer at Vector 35, the company that makes Binary Ninja, one of the standard tools for taking software apart. He is a core developer on it. He leads its debugger. He has 3 assigned vulnerability identifiers to his name from last year. He has spoken at reverse engineering conferences. He is, in other words, exactly the person you would want reading this particular binary, and you should weigh what follows accordingly. And here is the detail I find almost funny: he did not do it alone. He says so himself in the 3rd paragraph. He set up Binary Ninja's model context protocol server with codecs and started the analysis. Later, when he wanted to prove the function did what he thought, he had the model write the test harness. An AI agent pointed at Microsoft's AI watermarking library to find out what Microsoft's AI does to your pictures. So what did he find? He started somewhere unremarkable. Paint, it turns out, ships actual machine learning models inside the application folder. 4 of them encrypted with a file extension Microsoft invented. Nothing sinister. They are the segmentation and generation models that make the AI features work without a round trip. That part is genuinely on your machine, and you should give it credit for that. But sitting next to them was a library called Watermarker. 1.67 megabytes. That size is what made him look twice, and I want you to sit with why, because it is a nice piece of reasoning. Paint has a visible watermark, a small Copilot logo it can stamp in the corner of a generated image. Pasting a logo onto a bitmap is a few lines of code. It does not need 1.5 megabytes. So what is the other 1.5 megabytes doing? Something else was in there. So he opened it, and what he found was a second function, not the one that draws the logo. A different one entirely called write watermark. It takes an output buffer, an input buffer, the image dimensions, and a payload. And the payload length check is the giveaway. If the payload is shorter than 16 bytes, the function returns error -6. If it is longer than 16 bytes, error -5. 2 different error codes for 1 complaint, which Li notes is funny, and it is, but it also tells you the number 16 was not a maximum. It was the only size ever expected. Then the function does something that should make any programmer wince. It has been handed the payload length. It ignores it and copies exactly 16 bytes anyway. 16 bytes. Not up to 16, not 16 or 32 depending. 16 always hard-coded with the length you passed and thrown away. So ask yourself, what is exactly 16 bytes long and never any other size? The size of a globally unique identifier. He confirmed it by walking 1 level up the call chain, where the compiler had left the type behind in the symbol. Add watermark, taking a bitmap and a when at GUID. What? Not a checksum, not a version number, a GUID. No, What does the function do with it? Chapter 2, where the number comes from. The encoder is careful, and reading the description of it tells you a lot about what it is for. It does not embed the 16 bytes on their own. It builds an 18-byte message, a marker byte, then the identifier, then a checksum. The 16 bytes added together, modulo 256. 18 bytes is 144 bits. The encoder keeps 144 counters, 1 per bit. It rounds the usable width and height down to multiples of 8 and picks blocks of the image to write into. And then the rule that tells you the whole intent. Every single bit must be placed at least 3 times. If the image is too small to hold that much redundancy, the function refuses. Error -8. It will not accept images narrower or shorter than 192 pixels at all. Ask yourself what a designer is worried about when they demand triple redundancy. They are worried about the mark not surviving. Resaving, recompression, cropping. This is not a label. A label only has to be readable once by someone who is looking. This is built to be recoverable by someone who is looking later in a copy after the file has been through things. How much of the picture changes in Li's own test? And this is his test on a synthetic image, so treat the exact figure as illustrative. He generated a 512 by 512 image, ran the function on it, and compared. 193,000 of its 262,000 pixels came back different. Roughly 3 and 4. You cannot see any of it. That is the point of the word invisible. So 16 bytes pressed into 3/4 of the pixels, triply redundant, in a picture you made. Where does the number come from? This is the part that changes the story from a curiosity into an argument. Li traced backwards from the watermark function, caller by caller, and came out somewhere unexpected. Not at a random number generator. Not at a hardware identifier on the machine. At a network request. Before Paint runs the local image model. Before your neural processing unit does a single multiplication. A library called AI Services sends an HTTPS post to a Microsoft host. The path is version 1, Paint co-creator moderate prompt. The request carries 3 things: your prompt, the style you picked, and, hold on to this one, the identifier of your previous generation. The reply carries 4, a revised prompt, a prompt generation identifier, watermark identifiers, and a true-false field saying whether your prompt referred to a human being. That watermark identifier is the 16 bytes. Li did not stop at reading the code. He reused Paint's own authenticated session and called the endpoint himself, with the prompt a cobalt blue circle above a tiny orange square. The server answered 200 and handed back 2 fresh identifiers. He tried a second prompt describing a person, and the human reference field flipped to true. Now I cannot repeat that experiment. I do not have a Windows machine with a signed-in Paint session, and that live capture rests on his word. But I can check the parts that do not need one. So I did. I resolved the hostname on the 25th of August at 22:36 UTC. It is a real host. It is a canonical name pointing into Azure Front Door, Microsoft's Edge network. The address it lands on sits inside a block registered to Microsoft Corporation. I pulled the registration record to be sure. Then I sent an unauthenticated request to that exact path. It answered 401, unauthorized. Which is the correct answer. It means the path exists, the service is live, and it wants to know who you are before it will talk to you. Its own security headers name a Microsoft.com origin. None of that proves what the server returns to a signed-in copy of Paint. It does prove the pipe is real and that it is Microsoft's. So here is where we have arrived. Your prompt leaves your computer. A Microsoft server reads it, and it sends back a number that your computer then presses into the picture. Which raises an obvious objection. And it is a fair one, doesn't Microsoft tell you that? Chapter 3.0. Yes, partly, and the part it does not tell you is the whole of this story, so let us be precise instead of indignant. There are 2 Microsoft support pages that govern these features. I want to read you what they actually say, because the temptation on a story like this is to skip to the outrage, and the exact wording is better than the outrage. The Copilot Plus PC page says this, and I am quoting, "These features make use of the neural processing unit to generate images locally on your computer." Locally on your computer, that is the promise. 2 paragraphs later, the same page says you must sign in with your Microsoft account. and be connected to the internet to access cloud services that ensure safe use of AI. And under privacy, it describes what it calls a unique hybrid approach. Safety systems in the cloud, while the image generation happens on the device. So Microsoft does tell you the prompt leaves, credit where it is due, that sentence is honest. It goes further. Both pages carry this line. Microsoft collects attributes such as device and user identifiers along with the user prompts to facilitate abuse prevention and monitoring. Read that slowly, device identifiers, user identifiers, and your prompts, collected together for monitoring. Both pages also promise something back. The Copilot Plus PC page says, Microsoft does not store your input images or generated images. The Image Creator page says the same thing, minus the input images. Notice the shape of that sentence, images. It says nothing about the prompts and nothing about the identifiers, the two things the previous sentence said it collects. And on provenance, both pages say the same thing. Images will contain CDPA manifest helping users identify that it is an AI-generated image. That is the complete disclosure. Remote filtering, prompt and identifier collection, a manifest that tells a user the image is AI-generated. Now here is the counting exercise. I searched both pages case-sensitively for the word watermark. 0. On the Image Creator page 0. On the Copilot Plus PC page 0. GUID 0. On both, the phrase unique identifier. 0 on both. The only occurrence of the word unique anywhere on either page is Microsoft describing its own approach as a unique hybrid approach. The word identifier does appear once per page, in that one sentence about collection referring to your device and to you. So think about what a careful Windows user gets from reading the manual properly, not skimming it. Reading it the way almost nobody does, the way you would if you actually cared. They learn their prompt goes to Microsoft. They learn Microsoft keeps identifiers about them and their machine. They learn the saved file will carry a tag saying an AI made it. They do not learn that the image itself has been altered. They do not learn that 3/4 of its pixels changed. They do not learn a number was issued per generation by the same server that just read their prompt. And they do not learn that consecutive images are chained, because Paint sends the previous generation's identifier along with the next request, which links them explicitly. None of that is on the page. Is that a lie? No, I do not think it is, and I am not going to call it one. Is helping users identify that it is an AI-generated image a fair description of what the manifest does? That is a much harder question, and it turns on a piece of vocabulary the manifest itself uses, which almost nobody has heard of. The manifest does not just say an AI made this. It carries a value, and the standard has a name for what that value is for. Chapter 4: The Soft Binding. Li saved a real image out of Paint's Image Creator and opened the file. Straight after the header chunk sat a block of just under 19,000 bytes. Assigned Content Credentials Manifest, the C2PA standard, the thing Microsoft's support page is referring to. Inside it, 2 entries matter. The first is an action, and the action reads, Content watermarked by Microsoft Responsible AI. There it is, the word that appears 0 times in the documentation appears in the file. Written by Microsoft, signed by Microsoft, sitting inside the picture. Users are simply not the audience for it. The second entry is the one to slow down on. It is called a soft binding. It names an algorithm, Microsoft Invisibly version 1, and it carries a value scoped in its own words to the entire image. That value is the same identifier the server handed back during prompt moderation, the same 16 bytes that went into the pixels. 3 places. 1 numbers. So what is a soft binding? Do not take my word for it. Do not take Microsoft's either. The C2PA specification defines the term, and I went and read the current version rather than anybody's summary of it. A soft binding is a content identifier that is embedded as an invisible watermark in the identified digital content. And then the specification explains plainly what the mechanism is for. I am quoting section 4.3, soft bindings enable digital content to be matched even if the underlying bits differ. And this is the sentence. If a C2PA manifest is removed from an asset, but a copy of that manifest remains in a provenance store elsewhere, the manifest and asset may be matched. Read that again with your own file in mind. Why would you want to match an image to a record after somebody has stripped the record out of it? There is only one reason. because you expect the stripping to happen and you want the match anyway. The metadata is the part you can delete. The watermark is the part that survives deleting it. And the two carry the same number precisely so that the record kept somewhere else can be reunited with your picture after you have stripped the label off. That is not a side effect, that is the designed purpose, written into the standard. Which is why one exchange in the Hacker News thread is worth more than the other 400 comments put together. A commenter posted a fix: convert the file to bitmap, they said, then convert it back. The metadata gets removed, 2 shell commands, problem solved. Someone replied within minutes, that removes the content credentials metadata. It says nothing about the modified pixels. He is right, and the commenter had not misread the article. They had read it accurately and then made the assumption almost everyone makes, which is that a watermark lives in the file's attic somewhere and can be swept out. A third person pointed out that going to bitmap and back is lossy, so it might damage the mark. Might. Nobody in that thread tested it, and I am not going to claim it either way. But notice the shape of what just happened. It took 3 people and several rounds to establish what one image does when you try to clean it, and none of them ended up certain. And here is the detail that closes the loop on why bitmap even came up. After you apply an AI result in Paint, the Save dialog offers you PNG, JPEG, GIF, and Paint's own format, BMP. The format Paint was famous for, the format it has offered since long before any of this, is gone. Why would it be? Look at the standard again. Section 6.3, many classic image formats such as BMP do not support the embedding of arbitrary data, so the use of an external manifest is required. Bitmap cannot hold the manifest, so bitmap is not offered. The Save menu has been shaped around the provenance system, quietly, with no explanation in the oldest application Windows ships. Chapter 5, the switch that does nothing. Paint has a watermark setting, you can find it. It has 3 positions: never, ask, every time, and always. Set it to never, and Paint will not stamp the Copilot logo in the corner of your generated image. It does exactly what it says. It has no effect whatsoever on the 16 bytes in the pixels. Those are 2 different code paths, and Li lays out both of them. One reads your setting, checks whether you said yes, and composites a logo. The other never consults a setting at all. It runs after generation, every time, and it is not exposed in the interface. So the control that carries the word watermark governs the watermark you can see. The one you cannot see has no control. I want to be fair here because there is a reasonable design argument for that. If the mark's job is to make AI images identifiable at scale, a switch labeled "Stop identifying my AI images" defeats it on day one. Every serious watermarking scheme in the industry is mandatory for exactly that reason. Fine, but then the setting should not be called what it is called. When one thing in the interface is named watermark and a second, unnamed thing also watermarks, the first one is doing more than failing to control the second. It is standing in front of it. Now, how much does Microsoft care about that second path? There is a way to measure it, and it is unusually direct. Ask what happens when it fails. In Paint, if the watermark encoder returns an error, Paint does not hand you the picture. The entire generation is converted into a failure. Your prompt ran, the model ran, the image exists in memory, and you get nothing. Think about what that trade is. Microsoft would rather you receive no image at all than receive one without the identifier in it. Almost nothing in consumer software is built that way. Features degrade, thumbnails fall back, sync retries later. This one does not. And then in the Photos apps, which ships a library of the same name, calling the same function, the behavior is different. If watermarking fails there, the code writes a line to a log saying the watermark will not be applied and appears to return the image anyway. Same company, same month, same library. 2 opposite answers to the identical question. I do not know which one is the intended policy. That is worth saying out loud rather than picking whichever reading suits my argument. Perhaps Paint is right and Photos is a gap someone has not noticed. Perhaps Photos is right and Paint is over-enforcing. But you cannot claim both are deliberate. One of these 2 apps is not doing what Microsoft meant. Li flags a third loose thread himself and flags it honestly as an open question rather than a finding. On the cloud path, the image comes back from Azure already marked. If that endpoint can be made to return a generation before the marking stage, you would have an unmarked, unsigned image straight from the source. He lists 3 possible readings. intended behavior, product bug, security vulnerability, and declines to choose between them, on the grounds that he does not know where Microsoft thinks the trust boundary is. That is the right answer, and it is rarer than it should be. So let us stop describing the machine and ask the harder question, is any of this bad? Chapter 6, the other answer to the same law. Here is the fairest thing I can say for Microsoft, and I want to say it properly before I say anything else. On the 2nd of August, 2026, the European Union's Artificial Intelligence Act began to apply. Article 50, paragraph 2, is one sentence, and this is it. Providers of systems generating synthetic audio, image, video, or text shall ensure that the outputs of the AI system are marked in a machine-readable format and detectable as artificially generated or manipulated. That is the requirement. A machine must be able to tell that a machine made it. The law does not say how, its recitals suggest a menu. Watermarks, metadata, cryptographic provenance, logging, fingerprints, and leave the choice to the provider. But look at what those same recitals say the mark is for. Detecting, and I am quoting, that the output has been generated or manipulated by an AI system, and not a human's. What? The thing to be detected is the machine, not the person at the keyboard. Around 190 organizations signed the accompanying code of practice in July. So Microsoft is not breaking this rule. Microsoft is exceeding it. The Register, which broke the story to a wider audience on the 25th of August, put it exactly that way. Redmond has gone beyond the minimums. Now let me put the second company next to it. 12 days after the law took effect on the 14th of August, Anthropic published a post explaining how its text watermark works. Same regulation, same obligation, same month. They chose a statistical method. At each word where several near-identical choices exist, a key nudges which one gets picked. Read the output and you cannot tell. Hold the key and you can calculate a likelihood. And here is their own sentence about it, verbatim from that post. Watermarking carries no identifying information and can't be traced to a specific person, organization, or chat. What? Read those two designs side by side and the gap is not technical. It is a decision about what a mark is allowed to know. Anthropic's mark answers one question, was this probably written by Claude? It cannot answer any other question because there is nothing else in it. They say so and they list its limits themselves. It does not work well on short passages, it cannot detect another company's watermark, and it cannot tell you a human wrote something. Microsoft's mark answers that same question. And it also carries a unique per-generation value, issued over an authenticated session by a company whose own privacy note says it collects your prompts together with device and user identifiers, and it links to the image you generated immediately before it. One of those is a label, the other is a label with a docket numbers. What? Now I have to be disciplined about what follows from that, because this is where a story like this normally overreaches. Nobody has shown that Microsoft looks anyone up. Capability is not practice. Microsoft has not said whether it keeps the join between that identifier, that prompt, and that account. And the Register reports that Microsoft did not respond to its request for comment. So the honest statement is narrower than the outraged one, and I will hold to the narrow version. The infrastructure to identify the author of an AI image from the pixels of that image after the metadata has been stripped has been built, shipped, and installed on a very large number of computers. What is missing to complete it is not engineering. It is only a decision to run the query. Chapter 7, what I cannot show you. Everything I have told you rests on one person reading one binary. So let me be blunt about where that is thin, because you should not take this from me on trust any more than you should take it from Microsoft. Start with the largest gap. The Hacker News thread carries 422 comments by the site's own count. I pulled the public tree. 374 of them survive with their text intact, and read everyone's. Not one is somebody who repeated the analysis. Plenty of people argued about what it means. Nobody opened the library themselves and said, yes, I see it too. The finding has not been refuted, but it has not been reproduced either, and those are very different states to be in. So how much weight should you put on it? I could not close it myself either. I have no Windows machine here. The library, the function, the error codes, the redundancy rule, the call chain, the live capture. All of it is Li reporting, and I have labeled it that way every time. What I could check independently, I did. I resolved the endpoint and confirmed it is a live Microsoft-owned host on Azure front door. I confirmed the exact path answers and demands authentication. I read both Microsoft support pages in full and counted the words myself. I pulled the C2PA specification and read its definition of a soft binding rather than trusting anyone's paraphrase. I checked the date the European law applies from, in the regulation's own final article. Those hold, the binary analysis is one credentialed person's word, corroborated by the fact that the infrastructure it describes demonstrably exists. That is enough for me to tell you about it. It is not enough for you to treat it as settled, and I would rather you did not. Second problem, and it is an odd one. The person who posted this to Hacker News attached a warning to his own submission that the text reads as AI generated. Another commenter named the specific paragraphs. They may well be right, and Li tells you himself that he used a model throughout. The reverse engineering is either correct or it is not, whoever typed the sentences. But notice where that leaves you. A piece of AI-assisted writing about AI-generated images, flagged as AI written, in a thread about how anyone would ever tell. Third, there is a Microsoft research paper called Invismark on invisible watermarking for AI image provenance. I checked that it really is Microsoft's. The code sits in Microsoft's own repository, published on the 31st of October 2024. The manifest names an algorithm with that name in it, so the connection is obvious and tempting. I am going to resist it. That paper describes a neural network carrying a 256-bit payload. What Li describes in the DLL is 144 bits using classical matrix operations. Those are not the same thing, and he says himself that he is not a watermarking expert. The name matches. The implementation on the evidence available does not. If you see the two conflated somewhere, that is the join to check. Fourth, and this is the one I would most expect a story like this to get wrong. It is very tempting to say the European law caused this. It did not, or at least nothing here shows that it did. Microsoft was publishing research on invisible watermarks carrying unique identifiers in October 2024, roughly 21 months before Article 50 applied to anybody. Li's own phrasing is that the behavior might be related to Article 50, a hedge, and the correct one. A rule that began to apply this month cannot explain a design that was in the literature 2 years earlier. So what actually follows from all this? Chapter 8, the number that outlives the file. Here is my position, and here is how to break it. I think the interesting failure in this story is not surveillance. It is a naming failure with a very long tail. We have agreed across an industry and now in law that AI output should be marked. Reasonable, I am in favor of it. But marked turned out to cover two completely different objects, and we let one word carry both. Anthropic shipped a mark that says, a machine probably wrote this. It cannot say anything else by construction. They published the limits. Microsoft shipped a mark that says, a machine made this, and here is the number of the exact moment it did. Both are lawful, both are watermarks. Only one of them can be pointed back at a person, and nothing in the word tells you which one you are holding. What? That is the thing to keep, not the paint story. Paint is the demonstration. So what would change my mind? If Microsoft publishes a retention policy showing the identifier is discarded after moderation, most of my concern evaporates. The join is what makes the number dangerous, not the number. That would be a good outcome, and I would say so. If someone reverse engineers the same library and finds Li got it wrong, that the payload is a session value, or a model version, or anything not derived from your prompt, this argument collapses and deserves to. And if it turns out an ordinary user can find, somewhere I did not look, a Microsoft page that says the words, we embed a unique identifier in the image itself, then my central complaint is just that I read the wrong manual. I would like that to be true. On the 26th of August, 2026, I could not find it. Until then, here is what I would keep in mind, and it costs you nothing. A picture you generate on a Copilot Plus PC is not made in private. Your prompt is read by a company before your own hardware is allowed to draw anything. And the number that comes back is not in a header you can strip. It is in the picture spread through the pixels, every bit of it written at least 3 times over. Strip the metadata and the picture still knows. What? That is a strange sentence to be able to write about Microsoft Paint.